Hey fellas, Markiplier's Iron Lung movie adaptation came out not too long ago, and I gotta say, I really liked it. I was a bit worried going into it, but it definitely put down those worries and even blew past a few of my expectations. But of course, it wasn't perfect, and it's a movie that's not for everyone. It's a slow affair, much like the game is, and if you're unfamiliar with the game, you may be confused about a couple of the elements within the movie. But on its own, I'd say that most of it is pretty easy to follow, and the direction it goes in is extremely interesting. I'd personally give it a solid 8 out of 10, and I'd gladly see it again. Highly recommend if you like slow burn, dread building horror movies. Of course, some people don't like movies like that, and that's completely fine, so long as, in the case you review a movie, you do so with tact and represent the movie in an accurate and honest way. Yeah, Culture Mix didn't do any of that. I'm gonna say the name of the critic who left the review, but I just have to say, do not go out and harass this person in any way, shape, or form. Yes, I think that this review is bad. Really bad. But that only invites criticism, not harassment. If you want to do something productive with this review, just make sure that others know that it's not an entirely accurate representation of the media it's covering. Now, with that said, this review is done by a person named Carla Hay from Culture Mix. I'm not familiar with Carla, and I'm not familiar with Culture Mix, but I am, unfortunately, now intimately familiar with this review. I actually recorded me going through this for the first time and responding to it as I went along, but I'm gonna be honest, it didn't come out good at all. So now I'll be providing to Carla the decency she didn't provide to Iron Lung, and try to come at this in good faith and with a genuine want to improve. Before we get started, there are going to be some small spoilers for the movie in this review. Names of the characters, certain plot beats, story elements, sequences. If you don't want to hear any of that or are interested in seeing the movie, which I highly recommend you go into blind, feel free to get out of here. Go see it and then come back with an opinion of your own. All that being said, let's get started. The review starts with a basic breakdown of the races of the cast and a bit of an inaccurate description of the setting the movie takes place in, which is a blood moon, not an apocalyptic planet. Yes, the situation the universe is in is apocalyptic, but the area itself isn't inherently so. Also, I'll always find it strange to point out the demographics of the cast, especially when there are so few characters that you actually get to see, but it is a small section that is specifically to point out the representation within the movie, and it doesn't present it as a negative or a positive, so it's fine, I guess. Then there's a very basic and again kind of an accurate synopsis of the movie's premise, and then there's the audience breakdown saying it'll appeal to fans of Markiplier, which isn't untrue, but then it already throws some shade onto the movie by saying it also appeals to fans of monotonous horror movies where one character gets a vast majority of the screen time. We haven't really gotten into the review yet, this is just the introduction, and it's completely normal for someone to lay out their personal thoughts early on and explain them later, so we'll address that criticism when the time comes. On to the actual review. Incoherent and relentlessly dull, Iron Lung is a misguided horror movie based on the video game. There is nothing inherently wrong with saying this yet. This is the thesis, what she's going to be spending the review trying to prove. It's the next thing she says that I have a big problem with. When will social media stars learn that on-camera fame doesn't equal filmmaking talent? It might be why this awful and forgettable film was released through Markiplier Studios, the independent company founded by Fishbach, because it's hard to imagine any other studio would want to release this dreadful dud. Alright, 1, there's no studios, it's just Markiplier. And the main problem I have with this part is that it's more of an attack on Mark than it is a critique of the movie. There is nothing constructive about anything she says in this portion. All she's doing is talking down to a guy who has proven himself to have artistic talent time and time and time and time and time again. From what I've read already, she clearly doesn't have any respect for Mark or what he's been able to accomplish throughout his career, and it's likely that she has never interacted with any of his previous filmography. This is something that just personally rubs me the wrong way. People do this with a lot of creatives, but people who had a past in social media specifically get a lot of scrutiny when they try to break into theatrical film. Granted, that's not without reason, but I think that the stereotype has been broken as much as the video game movies always being bad stereotype has. And that second part, saying the reason why it was released through Markiplier was because it was just so awful, is just like, wow. Markiplier not needing to rely on a studio to get his film out there and being completely able to do it himself is something that was done out of maintaining complete independence and control over the project, as well as just not needing to go to a studio to get this film out. It was never, and likely will never be, because of the quality of the project being so low that no one would dare to release it. I mean, have you seen some of the crap that's been released by big studios? Come on. Anyway, on to the first actual criticism of the movie that Carla makes. Fishbach is also a film editor for Iron Lung, which plods along at such a dull pace with not much happening for long stretches of the movie. It's more likely to cause viewers to feel sleepy instead of feeling scared. The two things she's criticizing here are the pacing of the movie and the movie being uneventful for long stretches of time. Let's talk about the pacing first. In the first act of the movie, the pacing is a bit slower, and it's important for it to be that way. Though having prior knowledge of the lore of Iron Lung and knowing literally everything about the source material going into the movie was the case for me, the common person who doesn't know anything about Iron Lung needs to be properly acclimated into the universe, or lack thereof in this case. The quiet rapture, the Iron Lung itself, why Mark's character is down there, how finicky the submarine is to move and operate, and how derelict it is, the potential dangers faced down in the Blood Ocean itself, the conflicts of the world, Eden, the basics of the COI, what happened to Filament Station. These are all things that the movie has to establish and make sure an unaware audience can learn and understand. The movie takes its time to introduce and flesh out everything throughout its runtime so as to not overwhelm the viewer with massive lore dumps. After the first act is done, the movie picks up and pace dramatically as goals and situations change and evolve. That's when I get to the second thing she mentions, things not happening for long stretches of time, which is just untrue for all three acts of the movie. There is not a single part of the movie where things aren't being progressed towards or something important isn't being figured out or established. The first act, the primary operation that Mark's character is being forced to do, and a growing tension between him and Mission Control forming as they continuously move the goalpost on the terms of his freedom. They also establish the main parts of his past and the reason why he's there, as well as the existence of the terminal and the determination to survive that Mark's character has. The second act, establishing the cognitive decline of Mark's character, as well as the main antagonistic force of the movie, accompanied by some monumental lore details, as well as his character having a goal that he's constantly working towards, which is accompanied by him getting more acclimated to the ship and its inner workings and more comfortable with operating it. The third act, the climax where the most happens in the movie out of all of its parts, fully fleshing out who Mark's character is and was, furthering his relationship with the other characters, and how he continues to mentally handle the situation he finds himself in. There is constant momentum in the movie leading up to something, whether that's furthering the main goal of the situation, learning more about the past of the characters and the universe as a whole, learning about the nature of the quiet rapture and the blood moon. There is always something of at least some significance happening in every part of the movie despite its slower pace. And then I want to give some attention to the feeling sleepy instead of feeling scared point. Iron Lung isn't really a scary movie, the same way the game isn't really a scary game. The main feeling that both aim to give you is dread and absolute hopelessness. A constant fleeting wish that you'll be able to get out of an impossible situation if you just do everything right, with a constant, ever-present reminder that most wishes don't come true. This may not work on everyone, but it sure as hell works on me, as I can kind of relate to the situation in a more existential way, and the mental problems and struggles that Mark's character went through really resonated with me. Finally, moving on to the next point. The Iron Lung movie takes the same concept of the Iron Lung video game and makes it into a vanity film project, where Fishbach makes sure there are plenty of close-ups of his face, which usually has a blank or confused expression. Let's talk about the criticism levied here, which is Mark's apparent lack of expressiveness throughout the movie, claiming he has only a blank or confused expression at all times. Every time Mark shows a confused or conflicted expression, it makes sense, because his situation doesn't make any sense. He is constantly left in the dark about the conditions of his agreement, constantly ran around by Mission Control where what he thought was going to happen is no longer going to happen, is regularly learning how to interact with machinery that might as well be considered primordial, and is literally dealing with forces that we can't possibly comprehend. He has every right to be confused. As for the blank expression, I guess he has that a couple of times when he's doing more mundane things or going about the motions of a plan. Usually I'd say he looks more worried, frustrated, delirious, angry, and most of all, he really genuinely looks scared. Even then, the default position of a face is usually what a person is going to have for a majority of the time, but that doesn't automatically mean that that person isn't being expressive if they aren't constantly overtly showing some kind of emotion. Now, that isn't my main problem with this line. Some people can have a difficult time interpreting the emotional expressions of others. I won't hold that against her. What I will hold against her is the clear and ugly bias and predisposition she seems to have towards who Mark is as a person. When she says shit like on-camera fame doesn't equal filmmaking talent and saying he takes the concept of Iron Lung video game and makes it into a vanity project, it gives me the impression that she just thinks of Mark of some guy who hit it big on YouTube, decided one day, hey, I'm gonna make a movie. Why?
I'm Markiplier, bitch!
I can do whatever I want, and also it'll make me look above my pay grade and credibility. I'll make sure to get a lot of close-ups of my face in there so people know how much of a hotshot I am. God, I'm so handsome and cool. And saying stuff like this about a person you clearly know absolutely nothing about is not only disrespectful to the creator, it acts to discredit the creation of the movie by saying it was made for no other reason than for that creator to look good, which spits in the face of the amount of passion, work, and talent that went into the movie. Mark played Iron Lung and was fascinated by its world like many others who also played the game. The difference was, Mark had the means, hence him not going to a studio to help release the film, and the will to bring just a bit of that true potential to life, and the want to share it with the world alongside the man who created the world itself. If you ever have something to say or even imply about someone, especially if it's while reviewing a creation of theirs on its own merits, it's best to either be well informed about that person or to not say anything at all. Let's move on. Alright, this is where the names of the characters in the movie are going to be dropped. If you haven't seen the movie yet, are still watching, and are intrigued by what I said about it thus far, I recommend taking this time to go and see it. Let's see what she has to say. Just like in the Iron Lung video game, the Iron Lung movie is about a prisoner who was stuck on a small rusty submarine, nicknamed Iron Lung, on an unnamed planet, where he is submerged in an ocean of blood. He is tasked with exploring what's outside the submarine. In the video game, his character doesn't have a proper name and is just called the Convict. In the movie, this prisoner, played by Fishbach, eventually reveals that his name is Simon. Nothing much here, just a little summary of the core factors of the movie. However, I will point out that the moon isn't unnamed, it's called AT5, though I'm not sure if that's ever been stated in the movie, to be fair. And what's more, it's not a planet, it's a moon. The beginning of the movie has a voiceover from Simon explaining that there's been an apocalypse. He's been forced to work on the submarine to find something, but he hasn't been told what he's supposed to find for a very long part of the movie. A woman, whose name is eventually revealed as Ava, played by Carolyn Kaplan, keeps barking orders to Simon over an intercom system. Ava isn't seen on screen for most of the movie, but she does show up in a few scenes. So to start, I'm pretty sure that voiceover in the beginning of the movie establishing the quiet rapture isn't from Simon, though I've only seen the movie once and I could be wrong about that. Also, he wasn't put on the submarine to find something, he was put on the submarine to take pictures of points of interest that Control has marked on his map. He isn't told what he has to find because for a very long part of the movie, I'd say up to the halfway point, he isn't supposed to find anything. Getting into spoilers again here, pretty big ones, you've been warned. This is what he's tasked with throughout the movie, either by himself or by an outside party. His first goal, take pictures of points of interest. Then it's to get a sample from a point of interest. Then it's to reestablish connection with Mission Control and get himself back to a point on the map that's actually been officially recorded. Then he's tasked to, quote, find the light. Then he's tasked to find a submarine. He is told or has these goals all pretty much immediately and begins actively pursuing them pretty much immediately. There are very few points where Simon just flat out doesn't have a goal in mind, and that's all not even to mention his overarching goal that he has of finding his way out of the blood ocean so he can live another day. Also, Ava gives Simon orders maybe 4 or 5 times throughout the entirety of the movie. She isn't constantly barking orders to him, and saying so is wildly hyperbolic. Next line. About 80% of the movie consists of Simon being alone and talking to Ava, himself, or a few other people who randomly show up outside the submarine. Expect to hear Simon shout repeatedly that he doesn't know what to do. Iron Lung gets repetitive with Simon getting frustrated and annoyed about wasting time and not knowing what he's doing there. After a while, viewers of this horrible movie will feel the same way. No, you stay away. I can handle this. I want to refute the thought that the other people he speaks with who aren't himself or Ava are random people. Everybody and everything he speaks to has a logical reason to be there. Well, maybe not logical in terms of genuine logic, but in the case that it makes sense in the context of the movie. I believe he speaks to only 4 people throughout the entirety of the movie's runtime. Ava, one of the other workers after Ava is unavailable, the antagonist, and himself and the ship as he grows more accustomed with it. And a majority of the movie, he doesn't actually get the luxury of speaking with anyone. That's a key plot point that's super important to his cognitive decline. Simon doesn't shout repeatedly that he doesn't know what to do. He may ask for confirmation, ask for help in desperation, or ask for someone to try and save him from obliteration, but by the second act of the movie, Simon is much more proactive and confident in the abilities of both himself and the ship, and he pretty much never never outright doesn't know what to do up until the very end, and at that point, I don't think anyone would know what to do in the situation he found himself in. The comment about Iron Lung getting repetitive, with Simon getting frustrated and annoyed about not knowing what he's doing down there or about wasting time, is because those are questions that aren't being asked in a literal sense. They come up repeatedly because they are more about mortality. And Simon's is one that is constantly put in question because he is constantly in peril. Not only that, it also reflects on the perceived purposelessness of the operation Simon is partaking in when put into the context of this dying universe. Every time Mission Control gimps him on his freedom, he will obviously be a bit angry about being sent to a glorified execution when he was promised life, wasting his time with busy work just to make it seem like he may have a chance. And even if he did get out, what life would he have to live? A life of endless nothingness in an expanse of ever-growing darkness, surrounded by constant reminders of how little time is really left for the survival of humanity and the reality of existence as well. The movie is very introspective about the ideas of mortality and hopelessness and finding meaning in a place where none exists. So when he says, "Why are we still here?" it isn't "Why are we red and why are they blue?" It's "Why do we choose to keep on living?" Anyway, next, she says, there's some nonsense about Simon collecting samples, finding a handwritten note that says he should tie some wires together, and taking photos of dead people. There's a lot of arguing between Simon and Ava, who keeps dangling the promise that Simon will be set free if he does what she says. And there's even more long-winded ridiculousness where Simon is hunched over in a chair and trying to look productive when he's really not doing anything helpful to himself or anyone else at all. This is just inexcusable. I'm sorry, but if you have this much trouble looking at the screen and comprehending what's going on and why, you may want to watch a couple episodes of Dora the Explorer to build those muscles back up. Calling everything that you just said happens in the movie nonsensical and ridiculous is nonsensical and ridiculous. Literally, the only way you could have come to this conclusion after watching the movie is if you started playing Subway Surfers the whole time and only looked up periodically to get a semblance of an idea of what was going on for a movie that you clearly had no interest in giving any mind to in the first place. The sample not only serves as an important addition to the submarine's capabilities, but is also stated to be an integral source of data that the COI could use. The specifics of it may not be stated, but it is hammered home again and again that this is an important thing to recover. The handwritten note he finds not only serves to give us information about Simon's past and the truth of the Iron Lung being used before, but it also allows Simon to interact with the terminal, which is probably one of the single most important plot devices in the entire movie. And he never, not once, outright takes photos of dead people in the movie. There are scenes where he may have come across something that looks like that, but in those scenes, the act of taking pictures is either used as a light source or as a way to help him navigate. He is never tasked with taking photos of dead people, nor is it ever outright shown. Simon and Ava do argue in 3 key points throughout the movie, twice in the beginning and then one last time in the third act. All of them make sense, as I'm sure you would be arguing too if someone said they'd give you something if you did something, you did that thing, and then they went, well, actually. And I'm guessing what that long-winded ridiculousness she's referring to is the second act where Simon's primary concern is to get to a certain location. So of course he's going to spend time operating the submarine. And every single second of him trying to look productive is a second where he is actively furthering and progressing his goal of continuing to live. Jesus, let's move on. Iron Lung has fairly good cinematography from Philip Roy and an effective music score from Andrew Holsholt. The movie's main color palettes are murky dark brown and blood red. The problem is that the movie's suspenseful musical tone and spooky look are mismatches to the tediousness of the story. How? How does a movie's supposed tediousness not match up to its musical tone and look? How are those things even related? Newsflash, they aren't! Tediousness is a problem with pacing. It has nothing to do with the soundtrack or visual identity of the movie. A movie can be tedious and jovial, a movie can be tedious and sad, and a movie can be tedious and scary. There is next to no correlation between the pacing of a movie and its tone, visually and musically. This part of the review is completely useless and seems to just be an attempt to discredit a part of the movie that Carla actually liked. Almost like she's saying, yeah, this stuff was good, but it doesn't count because the movie is tedious. And finally, the last part we have to go through so we can be done with this review. The movie's acting performances are mediocre to awful and do nothing to bring any spark or personality to this soulless film. The ending of Iron Lung is very abrupt and disappointing. Fans of the Iron Lung video game are better off playing the video game, which is infinitely more imaginative than this turgid mess of a movie. So, first of all, I need to thank Carla for adding a new word to my vocabulary. Turgid. That doesn't happen often at all, so thank you. Now, I won't even dignify her critique of the acting by refuting the point she makes about it, because she doesn't even dignify her critique of the acting by making points about it. Calling the ending abrupt and disappointing is a big critique that actually came to the game, and with the game, though I disagree, I can see where you're coming from. In this movie though, the ending has shit completely hitting the fan. Everything is breaking down, coming apart. Things are happening that are the culmination of build-up throughout the entirety of the movie. Our thoughts of what's reality are being turned completely on their heads, and throughout all of it, there is still a goal that Simon has to do and is doing everything in his power to complete. And after all is said and done, it's shown that he succeeded and all that he went through was worth it, because now, because of what he did, humanity actually has a chance. Because of what he did, hope has been brought to the hopeless universe that is Iron Lung. The ending is triumphant, if not horrifically melancholy, and it does nothing but make me excited. And honestly, something tells me that Carla has never even seen the game, because that last thing she says about it being infinitely more imaginative than the movie is also just flat out not true. Don't get me wrong, the game is imaginative. David Szymanski's mind is a total wonder, and nothing that came after this game would have happened if it weren't for him being so good at planting those seeds of curiosity into the minds of those as imaginative as him. But this movie starts to get into things and ideas that I couldn't even begin to come up with, let alone act on in a way that even kind of makes sense. The way the movie expands upon the ideas and concepts that the game provides is just so cool and interesting, and I would love to see more, but I think it's for the best that this story ends with the movie, as what happens next is much more fun to think about than just to be outright shown. Also, calling it turgid, which means that it's bloated basically, is something that I already disproved somewhere within the other 6 pages above this one, but just in case, nothing in this movie is there without a reason. It may go slow at times, but that's because it deals with ideas and subject matter that need time in order to breathe and be tackled carefully. And that's when I get into when she calls it soulless. Bit of a warning, I'm gonna get off of Iron Lung specifically here, but I'm not being hyperbolic in the slightest when I tell you this is the most human movie that I've seen since Godzilla Minus One. I haven't talked about Godzilla since I've started my resurgence of this channel outside of shorts, but it should be quite obvious that he is my favorite character of all time. Not that I had a choice, I was pretty much indoctrinated into it since birth, but as I grew older, something that really started to bother me with the modern and past movies, with a few exceptions, and something that media as a whole has started to bother me with, is the lack of value it puts on human life. People die in troves in movies, games, books, whatever, you name it. There is probably going to be some nameless grunt or person of unimportance that will suffer a death with no second thought put towards them. And I get it, that's how life is. And giving people a reason to care about every single person that gets got in a movie isn't always necessary or needed for a piece of media, and in fact, in some cases could actively dampen the experience. Which is why it was so refreshing to see just how much Minus One places value on living, continuing to live, and doing all that you can to ensure the survival of others. It's one of the many reasons why it's one of my favorite movies of all time, and is likely one of the reasons why I like Iron Lung so much. Since The Quiet Rapture, humanity's numbers are probably in the thousands if I'm being generous. That means that the value of every single human life aboard the space stations has gone up dramatically. But in Simon's case, him being a convict means that his life is placed on a lower step than others. Of course, Simon is still human, and the value that his life has to himself is indescribable. I love Simon as a protagonist so much because of how human he is. He is the heart and soul of the movie, and he has a ton to offer. He is scared, but doing all he can to live. He knows it's hopeless, but is doing everything he can to cling to hope. He gets angry, and in the movie, he hurts people out of that anger, even though he doesn't mean to, and he wants those he hurt to know that he didn't mean to. He's not cold, he's not stoic, he's not calculating, and he isn't on the other side of being a complete bumbling buffoon. He is human. Even the little comments and things that he says or does are so relatable. At one point, he makes a comment about the situation he found himself in, and I just smiled and said, "That's exactly what I would say." To call this movie soulless, to disregard how it shows humanity through Simon, to disregard how it shows the value of sacrifice and how it's not always fair, but worth it, to disregard how it manages to turn a completely nihilistic world into a place that has hope for survival, is just disingenuous and ignorant. And thankfully, that is the end of this review. What a doozy. I really have nothing else to say about it because I think I just put everything I could say about it into the 7¼ pages I just read. That being said, again, don't go out of your way to harass the writer of this review. That doesn't do anything for anyone and would likely just solidify her feelings about the movie due to her clearly preconceived views about Mark and his audience. Though I did get a bit heated in this review and maybe a bit personal a couple times, it's just a movie review and in all likelihood won't have any effect on the world or anything. It's very important to me for all pieces of media and their creators to be treated equally and fair, but the actual impact this review will have will hopefully be very small. Thank you all for watching. If you disagree with me or agree with me or just want to have an input of your own in this matter, go ahead and put it in the comments below. Variety and discussion is the spice of life and should always, well, almost always, be respectful and cordial. Please don't be an asshole down there, it doesn't help anyone. I hope you have a great day and please be entertaining. And go see Iron Lung.